Welcome, everyone, and welcome to Aging in Nebraska, Planning for Your Future. It's a virtual event hosted by Nebraska Public Media, the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute, and the University of Omaha's Department of Gerontology. I'm Dr. Lakeland Hogan, a gerontologist and caregiver advocate with Home Instead, and I'm so happy to have you all here to talk about a fascinating new documentary called Fast Forward, and to talk about the best ways to plan for aging here in the great state of Nebraska. We're so happy to have two people associated with the film joining us today. First, we have Michael Eric Herdig, the director and producer of Fast Forward, and then Susan Woodruff, a nurse and caregiver who are both featured in the film. And then we also have Margaret Schaefer, the managing attorney for the Centralized Intake Unit at Legal Aid Nebraska, who will be here to talk with us further about elder law in Nebraska. She helps to run the Elder Access Line, which provides free legal assistance and advice to anyone over the age of 60 in the state of Nebraska. So thank you all so much for joining me, and welcome. Thank you.
Hello.
Hello. We're going to be watching some clips throughout our time together today, and then we're also going to be taking questions from the audience. So if you're watching, be sure to put any questions that you have in the chat box. We want to get to as many of them as possible. And we also have representatives from the state of Nebraska's 8 area agencies on aging who will be able to provide some responses to these questions as well. The area agencies on aging are a great resource for anyone who has questions about aging in the state of Nebraska. But before we jump into kind of the Q&A, I wanted to talk a little bit about this documentary. If you've not seen it yet, you can do so at nebraskapublicmedia.org/engage. We'll also be putting the link on the screen and in the chat so that you can see this full film. And I have to tell you, I absolutely enjoyed this so much. I think that the content of this film is really applicable to everyone, no matter your age. I just found myself telling everyone in my office, my friends and family, you have to watch this documentary. It is really fascinating. And again, we have the producer, Michael Eric, with us. And Michael, I think this is a really unique approach that you have taken in this film, a really fast forwarding to show people that they need to be starting to think about how they want to age and how they can have a better life as they age. So what really inspired you to take this approach with the film?
Thanks, Lakeland, and hello to everybody watching. Thanks for being here this evening. We decided on this fast forward approach for a few reasons, but one thing I can speak to is that as we did research for this film, as we watched many beautiful films about aging, there was one commonality, and that is that some of them, many of them can be tough for viewers to watch because we already have a built-in fear of aging and getting older. Most of us do. And it's not a topic that we want to spend a lot of time thinking about. So in order to help people approach it from a different perspective, we wanted to have a little bit of fun with it. And we also wanted to create a documentary experience for the people in the film, like Susan, who's with us this evening, to move past that barrier of thinking about our futures, which is, it's tough to imagine. And speaking to one of the experts that's in the film, Dr. Joseph Coughlin, the director of the MIT Age Lab, he said, people find it difficult to see beyond a few years in the future for most of us because it's simply difficult to look into a magic ball and truly see it. So we wanted to create really immersive experiences because we knew that's what was required to really reach into that future and prepare for it.
Well, I loved that you made it so immersive. I think that's what really does make it so engaging because I even started to think about, wow, I want to go through that with my mom just to get that experience. So I really do think that you were very effective in your approach. And Susan, I know that you were part of this documentary and film, and you were included in the sequence of you putting on aging makeup that really took you 30 years into the future. So I would love to hear from you, what are some of the standout moments for you in the making of this film, especially because you're still 52 years young. So I would imagine that this was a really unique experience for you and your daughter to go through.
Hi, Nebraska. First of all, hi, Nebraska. And I think you're right. As a nurse of cancer patients for 10 plus years, I talk about death all the time. But did I ever talk to my kid about it? No, I didn't. I guess, you talk to so many people about it, and you forget to talk to your own family about it. So it is those hard conversations that we've had to have, and it's easy now. I can look back and say, and I'm 55 years old. So I wish I was 52.
I was just trying to give you a few extra years.
And I'll take it. I've been lying about my age forever. But I just think that, like I just said, age is a number. It means nothing. It's what you're going to do with it, and how you're going to face it, and just let it happen. It's going to happen anyway. So just let it happen. But wearing the makeup was a very unusual experience. You can feel yourself, the facial muscles tightening up, as they're applying the glue, and that took all day. Remember?
I'm sorry.
It took all freaking day to do that. And the sun is setting as you see the end of the part of the clips. And you see us, that's the end of the when I finally got my makeup on. So yeah, it took forever. It's waking up at 6 o'clock. Now I know what movie stars feel like. But there's parts of this movie that y'all didn't even get to see. And that's the sad part. There's so much more information out there. And there's all these other people out there that are doing things that are innovative, meditating, and all this other stuff that I didn't even know was stuff that was right around my corner. So I can only imagine Nebraska. I know there's parts of it that are very popular, but then Nebraska is very spread out, and trying to get that kind of information closer to home that's a challenge. And I applaud all of y'all for doing that one. That's got to be hard. So I had a great time doing it.
Well, it is neat to hear from your perspective, and it is hard to take all of that content and condense it into just a 1 hour film. So I'm sure there was a lot of things we didn't get an inside look at. But Michael, Eric, I think you did, with the hour you did have, I think you created a really interesting film. And I know we're going to start watching a few clips and then kind of giving time for all of us to discuss. We're going to see a clip. The first one actually shows you, Susan, putting on what is called an empathy suit, which mimics some of the physical effects of aging. And then you go into an Airstream trailer with your daughter, Sophie, and she was hoping that as you age, you want to live in this environment. So I think people will enjoy this clip that we'll watch here now.
Susan's daughter, Sophie, came by to see how her mom was doing in her future home.
You want to sit down? You got it. It's hot in here, too.
That's not the problem. Problem is that,
What, they're getting old?
Yeah, getting old. I don't want to think about it too much.
Thank you. You're doing all right.
Okay.
Even though you just jabbed me in the head with those goggles.
I felt I had to make her feel safe and loved and not afraid. And that sort of stopped me from feeling things.
Well, you better get used to living in here, because this is going to be your little mother-in-law house. I'll get you a little ramp out in front. You can ramp your ass in.
I'd make it nice for her. She'd love that. and she could be in the yard hanging out and stuff. That would be probably ideal for her.
You want to go take a spin?
Yeah, let's do it. Here, stay where you are. I'll get you up. And besides, you'll have me to help you.
Okay.
And then I'll get you down these steps.
Thank you.
One of the things that we see with Susan is that insight into what needs to be done in our environment.
Right there, you got it.
Dear heart,
Bloop. Bloop. And then this is the last one.
ever coming back to me?
Put your hands on my shoulder.
Did you
Where we live is going to be a dictation as to how well we live in older age.
I mean, you've got it when it's out in the open. I just got to keep an eye on you so you don't slip and fall.
The old adage about real estate, location, location, location,
You got it?
Yep.
much can be said about where we age.
I always thought I didn't want to be in a long-term care facility, but I never thought this is where I'm going to be.
Easier to walk out.
It was too hard. The potential of falling. Somebody had to come in and take care of me. They couldn't do it there.
Would you feel comfortable living in the Airstream? Like, that would be, for me, the dopest idea for it in the future.
I just can't imagine my life in such a little space. Living in the Airstream, that might be something that Sophie might want to do, but I don't want to do that.
I think that I could live in it. It would just have to be modified so that you have more.
It feels a little close, you know?
Yeah. I just haven't really fully formed the idea of my mom not being the woman that she is right now, which is like headstrong and able-bodied. My mom is going to get older. That's hard and scary to think about.
Thinking about the future, it is important that we take a realistic look at what could happen and preparing ourselves, preparing our home environments, and having the conversations with family and friends to ensure that as you age, you're able to age in such a way that you really want to, that you're able to age with dignity.
That is such a great clip from the film. I think we're seeing so many things happening in those few short minutes. First, there's, Susan, the reality of how the body will change as we age. And you really got to experience that by wearing the empathy suit. And it made you kind of question, could I live in this Airstream that my daughter is thinking that would be a good place for me to live? So what was that experience like for you? I'd love to hear more.
It was definitely very eye-opening, very eye-opening. I mean, I'd been in the Airstream before, but being in it and in the suit, just the reality of not being able to move, the limitations, I can't even imagine it. You know, you think that you want to do something one way and then you do it and you really decide you don't, that's not something you want to do. You know, it sounds cool. I like camping. But I don't know if I want to do that now. I'm hoping my daughter's going to make a little more money and I can live in the boathouse, maybe a shed, and you know, I don't know. I just don't want to do that. I just think that it was very tight. You know, I just very uncomfortable. The visual, just having your vision altered. It was like this narrow, you're in a narrow space already and it makes it even narrower. And then you're lonely, narrow, you know, it happens, you know? So it was very eye-opening for me. You know, I hope that, you know, you can see the visual cues in my face that this ain't happening. This is not happening. So that's how I feel about that. So.
Well, thanks for that additional insight. And Michael, Eric, I would love to hear from your perspective what it was like to watch Susan and her daughter go through that experience together as you were filming.
Well, one thing I can mention that you can't see on screen because we don't have a four-dimensional viewing experience or a full viewing experience is that it was over 90 degrees Fahrenheit there that day. And it was really hot. And so I'm still living down the guilt for making Susan put on not only an aging suit in a trailer, but in that heat. But honestly, I think it's a little unfair to take the aging empathy suit and put it on the parents in each of the families, because it really was designed for younger people, in their 30s and 40s to wear. And Susan, at the time of filming, I think you were 52. And so it's tougher as we age to try it on, and it's that much more extreme, which is why it really creates an awesome immersive experience. But most often, I think it was just a kind of a magical experience to watch people truly be transported, and then to bring Sophie by and see her seeing her mom in a completely different way that she couldn't have imagined otherwise.
That is an interesting insight. To put on that suit on a hot day, I'm sure was challenging. But I think it would be so interesting to watch someone go through that experience. And think, as we watched, it brought up some really important conversations. And I know, Margaret, from your perspective, you see families, from time to time struggling with communication and conversations like this. So I guess my question to you would be, what would people need to know about planning? And then we did have a question that came from our audience that I want to couple with this. So my first question to you is, what do people need to know about planning? But then how do they start the conversation? Because it's one thing to know about it. It's another thing to get that conversation started.
Yeah, that's always the hard thing. When I talk with elders on the Elder Access Line, they tell me that, well, my daughter doesn't want to talk about this stuff, or my son says that it's too early, Dad. We don't need to talk about that. And I always tell them, you say that lawyer lady told you have to, and we have to have this conversation, and let's just find a way to do that. But there's many conversations at many stages that people need to have. And I encourage those conversations very, very early. So if you are someone, I'm in my 50s with adult children, we've had these conversations already. And so we start talking about the kinds of things that you might want now, what kinds of values you have, what's important to you, how do you want to be living as you age, and then the things that matter. What is it that's important for you to be able to spend your time? What are the things that make life worth living for you? Because what you're doing when you sign a power of attorney or a healthcare surrogate power of attorney is you're asking someone else to make decisions for you. And there's no way for them to know what decisions to make for you if you're not able to do so, if you haven't shared these sorts of goals that you might have. What are the important things? So it's really about starting early. It's really about having those conversations over time as your perspective changes. And it's about making sure that your family members understand what your values are and what decision you might make if you were able to do that for that time when you really can't speak for yourself.
Yeah, I think all of those are such important tips. And I think really we could sum it up with communication is key. You really do have to be communicating about these things, and it's never too early. I like how Margaret, you shared that, you're already having these conversations, but it's not a conversation you can just have once and, check it off the list, because as we age, our health changes, our living situations change. And so really, we need to be having these conversations regularly. And ideally, we want to have it before a crisis occurs. I know in my line of work, we often see people come to home and sit in a crisis, and they really haven't spent time discussing these things. And so the earlier people can do this, the better. And I know on the website, the Nebraska Public Media website, there's some great resources out there that can help you with these conversations, and also help you to prepare your environment. Because I know in that clip we just watched, the gentleman talked about, location. As we age, we need to be thinking about the environment. So one of the great resources on the site is a home safety checklist that can kind of help you make sure that your home or your Airstream is fit for aging in place. And so those are, again, important things to consider. So I thank you all for your thoughts on that first clip. And now we're going to watch another clip of Susan and her daughter, Sophie, attending a caregiving class that's put on by Home Instead. So we'll go ahead and watch that clip now.
Picturing my role in my dad's aging process, I want to be available to him when he needs me, if he wants me there. And then it'll probably come to a point where he won't want me there and I'll be there anyway.
Okay. There are 40 million family caregivers in the United States, and 1 in 4 family caregivers are millennial. People who are taking on the role of family caregiving are often caught by surprise at the level of complexity of what that care means. We need to better educate individuals around what could potentially be their responsibilities when caring for someone in the home.
Understanding caregiving will be important for our families. To help Sophie and Susan consider this, we took the pair to visit a local caregiving training seminar to learn the basics of home care that Sophie might one day give her mom.
What I do is the personal care training. What we're going to talk about today is doing transfers, using a Hoyer lift. You're up. Okay. So, Miss Susan, I want you to just lie down flat in the bed. Okay.
It was about the mechanics of it. How do you get someone who is infirm from a bed into a shower?
Hold it like this and like that. And want to make sure she is in the middle of this thing perfectly. Okay?
All right, Miss Susan. Don't be moving. You got to stay like you're old. I got to really practice, Mama.
Okay. My mom has had a lot of exposure to aging, the elderly, the sick. So my mom, knew everything. And I didn't.
This is letting it down. This is going up. Okay.
A person who might be bedbound, you lift them up with a hydraulic lift.
Don't go reaching for it. I'm very familiar with seeing you in that position. And it was kind of surreal to be you, and you're the person who needs my help. We gonna strap you in here?
I can't imagine you doing this.
Mama,
can you just hire these people?
You don't know it, Susan, but I'm gonna be showering your butt.
I was laughing about it, but I took it serious. Made me think about, this could be me. Made me think about the day-to-day care that you might have to give me.
It made me feel better about that part of it because it was like, oh, I could do this.
I'll be honest with you, I would want you to hire somebody.
Are you serious right now that you're not going to let me give you a bath?
If you could hire somebody, that'd be really good for me. I'm serious. It's not about...
Well, you better start saving, Miss Susan.
I'll save up for that.
It felt really weird having Sophie do that.
We got this, Mama.
I just don't want to be a burden, like most people. I think that's probably everybody's biggest wish.
No, I'm going to get you.
Okay.
I would have no shame in showering my mom.
How does that feel?
Feels good.
I, thanks to my mom, have a very strong sense of this is not weird. This is something that has to happen, and we have to clean this person up. So being weird and upset about it isn't going to change it. But realizing that my mom might have a different feeling when it's her own child doing it.
We did it, Mom. We did it.
I'm happy.
Very good. That wasn't that bad, actually. I thought it was going to be harder to lift that thing, but it's not.
Medicine, technology, science have gotten so advanced that we do live longer with more chronic or serious illness. As a society and culture and country, we really need to have more respect for the burden that family caregivers are taking on, especially seniors who are also caregivers.
Another great clip from the documentary. And for me, as someone who's a caregiver advocate, I'm always thinking about how we can navigate these dynamics between adult children and their parents. And this clip really shows the reality that often people face. Sometimes there's a disconnect between what the adult child wants and what the parent wants. And so, Michael, Eric, I would be interested to see, was this kind of a common theme when filming this documentary?
Yeah, thanks, Lakeland. I think that whether we're talking about where we're going to live, or who's going to care for us, or a living will, I think that the disconnects existed in each family in different areas. I think that Leo from the Portland, Oregon area assumed that his parents would live with him at some point in the future, and they assumed the same, although they hadn't spoken about it. We also know that Roger in Idaho knew or expected that Dre would give him care in the future. But meanwhile, there were disconnects when they started to separately give the idea of how they might make certain decisions as a healthcare proxy, or how Roger might have decisions made for him by Dre. So I think everybody, because these conversations were sort of being held off or only partial, everybody had a different kind of disconnect, which surprised all of them. I think a lot of us assume that we're on the same page as our parents or as our loved ones. So,
yeah. Well, and Susan, I would be curious to know, and I know that people in our Facebook community that are watching have been asking, how has this changed your relationship with your daughter? Have you been able to talk about these things and maybe better get on the same page when it comes to maybe these areas you were a little disconnected on?
Well, I guess for me, Ingrid, I was 18 when I had Sophie, just turning 18. So we're very close in age, really. So she helped me grow up, and this film helped me grow up. You know what I mean? Because I started to take more charge. I started to, talk to her about it. And it is what it is. It's not about really dying. It's not about death, really. It's about what do you expect for the future? And financially, what can you really afford, So I knew that we've always said that she was going to take care of me. She said that from very young. Same thing my other daughter says. I'm going to take care of her, put her in a nursing home. But the older one said she's going to take care of me. I believe her. I believe that they both will take care of me. So I think that I've talked to them more freely now about it, because the movie made me see that I really haven't been having those conversations with them that I have with everybody else, with my patients. I mean, I talk about it all the time with them. Why can't I talk to my own kids about it? And maybe that's just because I don't believe I'm going to die. I don't see that far into the future. I just don't see that. I look in the mirror, I still see that person when I was 18. I still see that person, just like in the movie, you see that I look at myself as I'm 80 or 85 years old, and I see that I look totally different, but I can see that my eyes are still the same. I can still see that sparkle. I think that, it makes you kind of think about those conversations and how you're going to have them, and, should we have dinner or whatever, make it like a yearly thing, or don't make it so taboo. That's the word.
Yeah.
Don't make it that word, make it like an everyday conversation. I would really like this in the future, like massages, you have one and then you think you're done. And then maybe you should say, I would really like a massage, maybe, 3 times a year or whatever your financial, maybe it's little things like that can keep you and your daughter close together and have those conversations forever.
Absolutely. I think you make a great point there, Susan. Continuing to have those conversations and make it commonplace, because I think we all try to avoid thinking about, our own death and mortality. And I don't think that we should jump right to that. I think we first need to address successful aging and how we want to age and our preferences. And I think you made a great comment too, Susan, looking into, financially, what can you afford as you age? And we've had some questions coming in from the Facebook page about, what are the requirements for various types of care? How can I find out about the various, senior living options? And I think those are great things to research. I know the local area agencies on aging can help you answer a lot of those questions. And Margaret, I'd be curious from your perspective. I know when people think about paying for care, oftentimes people are outliving their finances. They're having to look into options like Medicaid to pay for services. So from your perspective, are there any other types of kind of planning conversations from that perspective that families should be having?
Absolutely. And many times we'll get calls from folks who say, well, I have Medicare. Won't they pay for my long-term care needs? And the answer is no. The way that folks pay for long-term care can be a variety of ways. Often it's private pay. In other words, this is the rainy day you saved for. Sometimes families will assist with those costs. And when there are no other options, then Medicaid becomes the last resort to pay for long-term care assistance. And Medicaid requires that folks have spent down the assets that they have, and that they use the income that's coming in to pay for what they can pay for. And then the state takes up the difference and pays for the rest so that the elder is cared for. So it's a patchwork and lots of different ways that the costs get covered. And there are different requirements and different programs and lots of rules. There's ways to protect a spouse that's in the community if the other spouse needs to be in long-term care. There are rules about don't giving away all your stuff to qualify, because you'll have a penalty period, and other rules like that are really important. Many times folks will meet with a financial advisor, to help them to look at long-term care insurance or certain other investments and things if they have assets that they want to be thinking about preserving or using for their care. So lots of different ways.
Yes, those are all important things to consider as you're planning. So it's not just, okay, is my living environment set up for me to age, whether it's aging in place or maybe considering moving to another location, but it's, the finance planning that goes with it. That's also very important. And kind of paperwork and documents, which I know we've touched on a little bit, but we're going to watch another clip from the documentary of Roger and his son Trey talking about the importance of documentation and paperwork. So we're going to take a look at that clip now.
Our goal today is really to kind of touch on this big question mark of aging. We've seen people do it. We may have taken care of people who have done it, but it's never happened to us. My job is to help you prepare for the future so we can be proactive instead of waiting until we're in a crisis state and then we're trying to be reactive.
Right.
Who would be the person speaking for you if you weren't able to speak for yourself?
Well, I'm married, so first would be my wife, second would be my son.
Okay. And did you have any documents that you created that said that?
I have a living will in the process.
Okay, good. So you're working on it?
Mm-hmm. I have one started. It's just not completed. I don't know when I'll complete it, but it'll get done.
Well, how do you know how do you know when something bad's going to happen or when something could happen?
Oh, I hope to be ahead of it.
If you needed more help, like somebody coming into your house to help you with cooking, cleaning, maybe bathing or dressing someday.
Other than my wife?
Other than your wife.
I don't think that would take place.
Okay. What if she was doing all those things for you, but all of a sudden she got pneumonia?
Oh, well.
And wasn't able to do that.
Then we'd have to make an adjustment.
Right. Who would be the person that would manage your financial affairs?
Well, no.
Okay.
I have not done that.
Okay. And there's also financial power of attorney.
I've got one.
You have one. Good.
Who's in charge of your finances?
I haven't filled it out yet.
Oh, you
I
have
haven't
one though?
completed it.
Okay.
But it's ready. I'll have it ready to go. I haven't outlined it particularly yet because I'm not ill. I'm not on death's door.
What are you thinking so far?
I don't like any of it.
It's a weird process, man.
Yeah, man. You don't like
No, nobody
to
wants to think about it.
conscientiously think of that stuff.
No, you're right.
Another interesting clip from the film. And Margaret, I know you work within the legal system, again, at the Elder Care Hotline, which the resource information for that, the number for the hotline is on the website. So we'll make sure to post that again, the link to that site in the chat so you all can get that valuable information. But in your work at the Elder Care Line, can you walk us through the paperwork that you often talk to people about, and especially the paperwork that's important now while you're still planning? Because as we know, once a crisis occurs, it might be too late to get some of that paperwork in place.
Absolutely. Most of the time when people think of planning, they think of planning for after they pass on, which is a piece of it, but that's not really what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is, what do you need to have in order to take care of a crisis in some way? And we're talking about powers of attorney and healthcare powers of attorney and advance directives. And I hear from folks a lot that say, well, I'm fine taking care of stuff. I don't really need to do that yet. And we saw some of that in the film. But unfortunately, as we've learned in the time of COVID, you can't plan stuff. And by the time somebody is incapacitated, it's too late. So a power of attorney is a document that names who's going to take care of your financial affairs and basic decision making. And what the financial power of attorney allows your surrogate to do is to pay your bills, make sure your rent's taken care of, contract for you, go through your paperwork, sign things up, whatever it is, the details and the minutia of your life, if you're not able to. Now, I recommend that most adults have a power of attorney document, because even though right now everything's good, that can change in a moment. So if somebody has that power of attorney, they can take care of the immediate needs. Now, that doesn't mean that you won't step back in and take care of your own things in a few weeks or days or whatever that might be. But for the time being, they're taking care of things. Now, a power of attorney does allow people to have access to your financial affairs. So you want to make sure it's somebody that you completely trust.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't trust them, then you don't want to give them that authority. So it's somebody that is not going to misbehave or misappropriate your funds. The other one that's critical is that healthcare power of attorney with an advance directive. That allows someone to make your healthcare decisions, and they don't have to be the same person. You may have someone in your family, maybe it's your daughter that's really good with the numbers, and it's your son that should be making those healthcare decisions. It doesn't have to be the same person, and it helps to divide the labor. The healthcare power of attorney says who is going to make that decision for you. But then that advance directive says what kind of decisions that you might want should you be incapacitated and unable to communicate your own wishes. Neither of these documents let anyone overrule your desires and your values and what you've communicated in those conversations. They just say, this is the person I trust to speak for me when I can't speak for myself, or I'm just not up for it. So that's why it's critical to have these done ahead. Nobody is too young or too healthy to not need a power of attorney or a healthcare power of attorney. And those are available. If you're 60 plus, you can call our hotline, and the Elder Access Line resource, as Lakeland said, is on the website. And we can provide you with a form that you can fill out for the power of attorney and the healthcare power of attorney.
Thank you for sharing those really important pieces of information, Margaret. And I like that you had mentioned, your power of attorney for your, healthcare and finances, they can be different. It kind of helps to divide that workload amongst your family. And we actually had a question from the audience about, Jennifer is asking, do you have suggestions about sibling responsibilities and caregiving duties and how to kind of split that up? And so I love those examples that you gave. And this is something I often talk with caregivers about. And I like to use the example of my own family as to how I think down the road we would divide up kind of caregiver sibling duties. But I look at all of my siblings' strengths and what we like to do and what we're good at, and then kind of use that to divide how we might approach the care. So Jennifer, you might have a sibling like my brother who majored in business, and he likely will take care of kind of the financial side of things. I have a sister who's a nurse who she will likely go to all the healthcare appointments. She'll know what questions to ask. She can report back. She might also be more comfortable doing that personal care, that bathing hands-on activity. My other sister, she's long distance, and I know a lot of families have that scenario, a long distance caregiver. So we might rely on her to be kind of the social butterfly, to call the parents, check in regularly, do FaceTimes, and maybe come to town and relieve us of our caregiving duties every so often. And then myself working in the field, I also live close to my parents. I might be more of that everyday stop in, make sure they have their groceries, cook the meals, do some of that stuff. So again, Jennifer, that might be a suggestion for you, is to figure out what everyone's strengths are. And then sometimes you just have to ask, because often family members want to help, they just don't know how. And so those might be a few extra tips for you, Jennifer. But then, Margaret, I do want to kind of have a follow-up question to some of those important legal specifics. And one is a power of attorney versus guardianship, because I think there is some confusion or some clarification that people might be helpful for you to provide around that.
Power of attorney and a healthcare power of attorney are documents that you as the individual sign to grant someone else the authority to make decisions and contract on your behalf. A guardianship is an entirely different thing. That's when a judge in a court says that you no longer have capacity, and now this person is appointed to make all of your decisions for you. So when I was talking about powers of attorney, I said that you can't be overruled by your agent. It's more like an employee-employer relationship. When I give you a power of attorney, I'm directing that, I'm choosing it, I am making the decisions that I can, and you're to make those decisions based on my values, my guidance, and my direction. If I don't have a power of attorney and I become incapacitated, then my family has to go to court. Now it's more like a parent-child relationship where the guardian says what is. They decide where I live. They decide how I spend my money. They may decide who can and cannot visit me in my facility or in my living arrangement. They decide how my money is spent, what kind of health care I get. And they're guided by the principle of doing what is in my best interest. So while it's still important and they have a fiduciary duty and they're supervised in a sense by the judge, and the judge is the one making the decision, it is an entirely different relationship. The other important consideration is, as I mentioned, if you want to call the Elder Access Line, if you're 60 plus and get a power of attorney, you go take it to your bank or to a notary, you get it signed. There is no cost involved in that. If your family is filing a guardianship, there is generally going to be a cost in attorney fees and filing, and you've got to do courses, and there's a lot to a guardianship. So it's a very small document that is easy to get, doesn't cost you anything, and takes care of stuff, or a very intrusive guardianship. Now, that being said, there are certainly circumstances where a guardianship really is the right thing. And these are cases where the elder is acting outside of their own best interest and becomes their own worst enemy. And so someone who is clearly neglecting themselves or allowing others to abuse or take advantage of them may need a guardianship regardless, because they're harming themselves in many ways. But that's really a distinction between those two different things, and they're often very confused. Now, if you call us and say, I need a power of attorney over my mother, the answer is we can't, unless mom calls and we can talk to her. And then when that child says, but mom's in a coma or has dementia, we have to have the guardianship conversation at that point. And that's very difficult.
Yes, well, thank you so much for clarifying that and for providing some good examples in there. I think that is very helpful and adds so much to this conversation. And Michael, Eric, I think going back to this clip of Dre and his father, it was so interesting because they were talking about this paperwork. And on one hand, they added some humor to the situation, but there was also a little bit of tension that I was sensing there. And so I'm wondering, was this common among some of the other families in the film, that little bit of tension around these conversations?
Yeah, of course, we interviewed everyone prior to making the film, and we wanted to include families that were across the spectrum of comfort with the idea of aging. And with Roger and Dre, we see that extreme tension there, where if you visit the film's website and see our follow-up videos that we made with our cast 2 years later, I did ask Roger whether he has yet delved into doing this paperwork with Dre, and he still didn't want to discuss it with us, and he still didn't want to complete it. And Roger, if we brought him into our panel this evening, would say the same. He's not there yet in his mind. And meanwhile, some families might have less tension, but for those that do have more tension, it might be a parent who doesn't want to discuss it, but it also might be a parent wanting to discuss it with their child who doesn't. And I think there are easier ways to start the conversation with ideas like where might you want to live, as opposed to can you complete a power of attorney right now today? Or can you make a decision about me being your healthcare proxy right now today? Here's the paperwork. And Dre uses one interesting method that he actually used, that he suggested in the film, in their conversation in the parking lot. And he said, I'll do one myself. I'm going to do one myself. And he did go ahead and do one himself so that he could show his dad that he's a strong young man in his 30s, and he needs to complete this paperwork for himself as well. So there are different paths into these conversations. And I think that although you have to be more creative when there's more tension, there are ways to get the conversations started. And thank you for all of that additional background on the guardianship versus the power of attorney. We covered a lot in the film, but I hadn't learned that yet myself.
Michael, Eric, thank you so much for sharing that perspective. And Susan, I feel like I have to ask, have you set up some of this paperwork for yourself? Were you inspired to do some of that after this film?
I was. I've filled it out. The other thing, Ms. Margaret, bouncing on what you had to say, I think that for all the parents out there, it takes that, like when someone passes away, everybody starts to fight, or they're fighting over this or fighting over that. They're fighting over who. Guess what? Stop it. This is what I'm gonna do. This is you putting your foot forward and saying, this is what I want. This is, there's no qualms on, like with my mom. She lives with my sister. I visit her almost every day. I went on vacation with her by myself. That was an eye-opener. and then, like, just stop. You don't have to have a big fight over anything. You do this, you do this. Hey, and then I have a brother, and he takes her out to lunch, and we kind of dictate to him what he's going to do. Like, you take her to the doctor's appointment? Can you do this? Can you do that? So we all try to split it up, because it's too much for just one person. I mean, there are all those single people out there, and I feel for them, I think it's a lot, especially as we age, at the end, where's, there's a million alternatives out there, there's, every phase of your life, there's different things. All you have to do is, find it, and all these websites that we're talking about, I think that is fantastic. The power of attorney, does it have to be notarized? What about the other, those documents? Some documents have to have a notary, but some don't. And I think that you are there to help navigate, and I think that's fantastic. There's so many things that the elderly and not elderly, 60 years old, that's not old. I mean, that is not old. I think that, thinking about them when you're younger and not waiting till, and I think we had something in one of the other meetings that I thought I brought it up. We have all this electronic medical records now. I mean, why are doctors not having this conversation? DNR, not DNR. You don't do it once, you should do it every year on the physical. So then it's out there, and it's not something your family and friends have to make a choice for you. It's you having power over your own life. And I think empowering people does so much more for people. And, I did this. I know how I'm going to end. I know how I'm going to live my life. I got this. Let's just, see what happens,
I think Susan brought up a really good point there when she said that we learn how to age when we watch our parents age, and we learn how to deal with these things to some extent, or we don't, by watching how our families have dealt with parents and grandparents and the issues that they faced. And some of that, if it stays unspoken, kind of gets assumed, and what happens there, but it does open up some of those conversations among family members. You remember when grandma went through this, that this is what happened, and I want it to be like that, or I don't want it to be like that. Or, those conversations can start there.
Definitely.
Yeah. Well, and I think that we could talk for hours, and I know we're coming up towards the end of our discussion today, but I do want to get to one more clip because I think it kind of points to something that Susan, you just brought up. We age, and it doesn't mean we're going to die tomorrow. We have a lot of time, hopefully, for many between now and then. And so we really can choose the way we age. We can also choose to have, a positive outlook. We can continue to engage in our communities and society. And so one of the last clips we're going to watch today is a conversation that Carol and L'Oreal have with a woman named Tina, who is a 93-year-old who is a greeter at this beautiful cafe that fosters intergenerational relationships and connections. So I want to watch that clip quickly and have a short discussion before we end today's session.
How did you get started here as a hostess? Well, my daughter was here first. She was making cookies and jams. And I came down to have lunch one day. And I looked around and I'm going, oh, wow, this looks like a coffee house in the village in the 60s, only there's no smoke and there's lights. And the two owners, they said, listen, we were watching you. We want you to be hostess. I said, I've never done it. I said, you could do it. We see you talking to everybody. You hug everybody. So that's how I started.
Older adults could benefit from having a connection with young people that often keeps them healthy and invigorated and positive.
When it came to baking, the idea was to find a way to mix older bakers with younger bakers. That's pretty much how we decided to go about re-engaging retirees.
He's my biggest booster.
Just to see Tina and not realize she was 90. I thought she might have been like 80, 75, 77, 78, somewhere along in there.
How long have you been working here?
I guess about 2 years.
Wow. Do you see yourself ever not working here?
No.
No. What's your one word for here?
Friends.
Friends?
Young and old. It doesn't matter who they are. That's the idea of this place. They want to reconnect the young and the old. And
we're all going to mature, our bodies will age, but I think being old is more like a state of mind. And I asked her, are there things that you want to do? And she said, oh yeah. And she's 90. So don't get old, get Tina.
I really just loved Tina. I want to be Tina when I'm 93 years old. My goal is to live to 100, so I hope I make it. But I just love her mindset and the outlook that she has. And I think it's so important as we age, we can still be so engaged in the community. We can engage with those in our social circles. I know OLLI, the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute here in Nebraska, provides older adults opportunities for ongoing learning and continuing education, and people can volunteer, and there's just so much that we can do to foster that successful aging as we get older. So I feel like we had to throw that in because it is a serious conversation, planning about aging, making sure you have the right documents in line, making sure that you have your financials in order, but also make sure that you equip yourself to live the best life possible as you head into your older years. So I thought that was such an inspirational clip. And Susan, I would welcome your thoughts on how do you want to kind of age successfully? Are there any things you took away, any things that you're going to start doing or want to do in your coming years?
Well, I've done a lot. I mean, I saw myself on screen and I was like, oh no. So I lost 40 pounds. I joined a gym. It's little things that you can do every day that I feel, just being grateful. Having a sympathetic ear for the next person. I think that, I think if anything with this COVID, we should take away, hey, is there anybody in the neighborhood who needs help? Any of the older people, it doesn't really have to be older people. It could be somebody even younger than me. Do they need any help? Do they need any food? Do they need any help getting to the store? Do they need, I think if you start doing that and your children see you do that, I think that we get a more caring generation, and then the next generation, and then hopefully, that pay it forward will really pay it forward for everyone. That's my feeling. So I try to be nice to everybody. When I talk to someone, I talk to them like they were my mother, brother, sister, and uncle. And I try to remember that in my brain. Susan, what if that was your mama? What if that was your daddy? How would you talk to them? How would you treat them? So I think if I keep paying it forward, that, and have those conversations with my daughter every, 6 months or whatever. Yeah, don't even have to do that. Just, like you said, you see something that you like, say it. I like that because I like the way, mama's being cared for, or I like the way, maybe whatever. She got to go to the hairdresser. Whatever she liked to do, just make it happen, financially. And that means talking to everybody, talking to all your family and your friends and your children, and letting them know what your needs are on an everyday basis.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And Michael, Eric, from your perspective, you've watched these families go through these various simulations, and you've gotten to also interview, or film Tina in that cross-generational cafe. So what would you say to those watching today, whether they are just thinking about this conversation for the first time, or if they have started down that planning journey? How can we continue as a community to keep talking about this and keep the conversation going?
Well, Susan, I think you said it really well. This sense of connection to others around you is at the center of what we all discovered together in making Fast Forward, and what's out there. A loose network of people helping people age. And what wasn't in the film was an experience we took Leo and Abe on in Portland, which was to meet people who are part of a Village to Village organization, one chapter of the Village to Village organization. And Susan, you talked about paying it forward. People volunteer to help one another when they're in need. And then as people age, when they're no longer able to do things, those that they helped and others come to help them. And regardless of whether or not you have family that will be able to care for you as you age, if people can take a look around and see who will my support system be as I age, and connect with those people and talk with them about it, then perhaps they'll also be inspired to do so, those that we're speaking with. So that is, I think, one of the most important things that people can do as they move forward to make those connections, so that during our lives as older adults, we're ever more connected and we can support one another.
That's fantastic. And Michael, Eric, I know that your team has created some experiences that you can find on your website, so people can, maybe they won't be able to put a full set of makeup on and age themselves 30 years, but you have some unique exercises that people can go through, and we'll make sure that website is added to the Nebraska Public Media website. But Michael, Eric, real quick, what is the website for those resources?
It's fastforwardmovie.com, and among our Fast Forward experiences that we created for viewers to live a little bit of the aging boot camp for themselves is the ability to make your own music soundtrack. We see your own high school music soundtrack. We see music therapy in the film, and viewers can go on our site, type in enter the information about the year they graduated from high school, and have a Fast Forward experience like that in the film with family members, among a number of other experiences. So that's at fastforwardmovie.com.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And Margaret, I would love to hear from your perspective. I know we have covered a lot about the resources available here in the great state of Nebraska. Are there any additional tips around planning that we haven't covered yet that you would encourage people to look into or check out?
Certainly the Legal Aid of Nebraska website has some good resources for some of the different issues that folks face. And the Elder Access Line is available for legal advice for seniors 60 plus. There's tons of information out there. You can find what you need. You just have to do some Googles.
Absolutely. And the local area agencies on aging are also such a great resource. Oftentimes, if you don't know where to start, give them a call and they can at least direct you to the right place, and they can help answer a lot of those questions. And we could talk about all of this for hours on end, but I just want to thank you each for joining us again. Michael, Eric, the director and producer, Susan, participant in this documentary, and Margaret from Legal Aid of Nebraska and the hotline. So thank you all so much for being here. And I'm Dr. Lakeland Hogan. It was a pleasure to facilitate this panel. You can watch the full Fast Forward film, the link to that and all of the area agency on aging websites and on all the other resources we talked about today, that can all be found on the Nebraska Public Media website. The website is nebraskapublicmedia.org/engage. So Thank you all so much for joining us today. Thank you all for asking great questions. And most importantly, thank you, all of you panelists, for contributing such wonderful information. It was such a pleasure to have you here. Have a great night, everyone.
Bye. Thanks a lot.
Bye.